This is Miles Harrington, still broadcasting, still surviving. It's been 23 days since I last turned this transmitter on, maybe more. I stopped counting when the air in here got too thick with copper and mildew to tell time by scent. The blood bank is quiet now. Everything hums low. The cooling unit's dead. The emergency lights pulsing like a dying heartbeat. I power this place with a bike rig and an old inverter I stole from a survivalist gym back in Santa Fe. You can laugh if there's anyone left to laugh. I've made it through another week on filtered rain, dry crackers, and powdered protein. The kind you wouldn't feed your old mutt in better years. My left knee's acting up again. The old fracture they never fixed right. Every time it rains, the ache sings. Some part of me likes it. At least it reminds me I'm still here. Still made of bone. The silence presses harder than the hunger. That's what people don't tell you about solitude. It has weight. Like wet wool. It sits on your chest, presses down while you sleep. Makes the mind do things it shouldn't. Think things it shouldn't. But I turned it back on tonight. The radio. Because silence only wins when no one speaks into it. If anyone hears me, on 95.7 AM low frequency band, know this, I'm alive. Still wired in. Still watching the edge of this dead desert for a flicker of something that looks like a pulse. This is Miles, still broadcasting. It didn't start with fangs. It started with waterlogged ice and a patch of Alaskan tundra that hadn't seen light in 40,000 years. Scientists thought they'd found a bacterium dormant, frozen in time. What they woke up was older, hungrier. The parasite had no name, just a classification string in a crumpled research brief, HVX12A. Harmless, they said, unstable, no signs of reproduction, and then it mutated. Within weeks, emergency rooms began filling with patients who couldn't keep their eyes open under daylight, who healed faster than anyone should, whose blood changed viscosity under stress. That's how it began. A shift in fluid density, a spike in clotting efficiency, a whisper that the body had learned something. Foreign. Then came the hunger, not rabid, not even violent at first, just insistent, measured. People started disappearing in cities where the sun rarely rose. Juneau, Vladivostok, Reykjavik. No one said vampire. Not then. That word came later, much later, when the draining became methodical, when blood banks stopped running out because they were empty and started running because they were full. It's easy to think monsters arrive with teeth and red eyes, but this didn't scream. It crept. It redefined us from the inside out, rewrote our genome with the ink of evolution, and by the time we noticed, the manuscript was already complete. I remember standing in a grocery line, weeks before the streets went red, listening to a woman cough behind me. She had a nosebleed. Didn't think much of it. Now I wonder how long it lived in her, what it whispered while she slept. This is Miles. This is how the blood began to lie. Her name was Elise, back when names still meant something more than the memory they left behind. She was a trauma nurse in Tucson, steady hands, sharper mind, the kind who could find a vein in a blackout or talk a man down from his last cliff edge breath. When the red orders rolled in, military-backed quarantine squads armed with plasma scanners and flame units, she was still trying to save people, still believed the contagion could be mapped, modeled, managed. I didn't. I ran. And Elise, she pulled me with her. We escaped through a broken pediatric wing at St. Mercy's. She carried the last cooler of uncontaminated blood on her back. Not for herself, not for me, but for a child hooked to a ventilator 3 floors below. The child didn't make it, but Elise never let go of that pack until the desert swallowed the skyline. We hid in storm drains, slept in abandoned cars, filtered brackish water through pages of an old anatomy textbook. She taught me to bandage a laceration with twine and gauze from a motel sewing kit. She called it improvised medicine. I called it grace. I haven't heard from her in months. Last I know, she was headed toward Flagstaff, chasing rumors of an underground infirmary beneath the old observatory, a place where blood was shared, not sold, a place untouched by harvest drones. Some nights, when the static gets quiet enough, I think I hear her voice in the noise. Other nights, I don't listen, because I'm not sure which silence would hurt more. Hers or mine. This is Miles. And for what it's worth, Elise, I still remember the way you said goodbye. Like it was a promise, not a parting. Tonight, something blinked, just beyond the dry ridgeline, south-southwest. Near the old highway radio towers, a light stuttered 3 times, then went still. It wasn't lightning. Wasn't a drone sweep either. The pattern was too deliberate. 3 short bursts, like code, like breath. I've seen that tower dead for months. Shot out during the great blackout sweep when the feds tried to isolate the inner blood zones. They wanted silence. They feared what voices could do, so they broke the repeaters, cut the ham loops, hunted rogue transmissions like wolves after a scent. But now, something's changed. I've been scanning all night, looping through the low band frequencies like a man circling the last embers of a campfire, hoping one catches. Nothing concrete yet, just pulses. A thrum behind the hiss, faint like a heartbeat in deep water. Someone may still be speaking, or maybe someone is listening. I won't risk going out tonight, not with the winds this dry and the barometric pressure falling like it is. Feels like the air's about to split open, and when it does, the things that hunt in that kind of stillness, they don't announce their arrival. They just begin. But tomorrow, if the signal holds, I'll move. Carefully, quietly. Because in this world, a flicker of light is a dangerous thing. It draws hope. And hope, in times like these, draws everything else. This is Miles. Still watching, still waiting, still broadcasting. The light used to mean something. A measure of the day, a warmth you could count on. A rhythm by which everything lived. Trees, rivers, cities, breath. But the day the Pacific Rim cracked open like a rotted tooth, the world lost more than coastline. Chain eruptions, they said. Ash plumes that towered into the stratosphere, blotting the sky in layers so thick you couldn't tell noon from midnight. And it never left. The ash. It dances with the clouds now, drapes over what's left of the earth like a funeral veil we forgot to remove. The color of the air is rusted, the kind of gray that seeps into your skin, no matter how many layers you wear. Sunlight? It's a memory, a word the children at Second Son don't understand. They look up and see only blur, a dim orange smear that never changes, never moves, no shadows to chase, no morning to hope toward. It's been 3 years since dawn was a thing you could feel on your face. The plants withered first, those not protected in biodomes. Crops collapsed, bees vanished. Photosynthesis slowed, stuttered, stopped. Then the temperatures began to slide. Not cold enough to kill outright, not warm enough to sustain. A planetary shiver. I used to think darkness was the worst thing that could happen to us. Now I know better. It wasn't the loss of light that broke us. It was the loss of direction. This is Miles, still remembering, still transmitting through the dim. The moment the hospitals fell, the markets followed. Supply chains had already buckled, ports buried in soot, highways littered with dead engines and stalled freight. But blood, that stayed valuable. Blood moved. It didn't matter if it was O negative or B positive, filtered or full of iron. It became the only thing anyone would trade for food, for meds, for a warm place to sleep behind barricaded doors. Not gold, not gas. Plasma. At first, it was a trickle. Voluntary drives run from what was left of city halls and school gyms. Give life, get life, they said. 2 pints for a week's worth of rations. 4, and you'd get priority in the shelters. For the first time in history, survival had a blood price you could calculate. Then came the plasma bonds, literal credits tied to your extraction record. The more you gave, the more you were worth. Some sold their children's blood for antibiotics. Others forged donor logs to avoid conscription. We called it the red economy. But it wasn't sustainable. The human body isn't an infinite reservoir, no matter how desperate the world becomes. Then the vampires began to organize. And suddenly the exchange rate shifted again. The market was no longer run by survivors, it was run by feeders. I still carry my last donor card. It's laminated, smudged with dried sweat. Shows my blood type and the date I gave too much. They took more than I thought I could live without. And yet, here I am. Still here. Still wired in. Some currencies inflate. Some devalue. But blood? Blood always returns to the body of power. This is Miles. Still hemorrhaging stories. I found the letter inside a folded thermal sock tucked into a half-rotted footlocker marked Camp Mercy. No stamp. Just my name. In her handwriting. Elise. She must have left it for me. Or someone. Or no one. Maybe it was enough just to write it down. The paper's fragile now. The ink bled into the grain like veins. Still legible. Barely. Miles, we're still running the infirmary, but it's different now. We don't call it a clinic anymore. The word started to sound dishonest. We call it the below, because we're beneath Flagstaff's surface now, because hope can't survive in open air anymore. We treat what we can. We barter when we must, and we bleed when we have to. There are fewer of us now. Most didn't die. They just stopped trying. Stopped resisting the draw of clean extraction. It's so gentle, Miles. You barely feel it. They offer sedation, warmth, a meal. They say it's painless. I believe them. That's the problem. We ration blood now, not just food. Our own. Each person gives a quarter pint a week. We track it. We store it. We use it when we must. I hate it, but I also understand it. What's left of medicine is just a mirror now. It reflects our need and our fear. She signed it with a code word only we knew. Marrow light. It meant hope in darkness. The last line haunts me. If you find this, it means I'm either gone or watching. I don't know which would be harder to live with. This is Miles. Still reading, still bleeding, between the lines. And now, there's a voice. It came through at 3:17 a.m. Faint, compressed, but unmistakably structured. An automated loop. Male, accented, English, Portuguese, something between. Hematopolis protocol initiated. Zone R17 secure. Intake process operational. Harmony in the Dominion. The transmission repeats every 19 minutes. The signal rides on an older relay band buried beneath the standard atmospheric noise. I had to recalibrate the antenna manually, twist foil, redirect gain, dampen static with copper mesh. But once it locked in, I heard it. Clearer than anything since the collapse. Hematopolis, the first confirmed vampire run. City. We used to joke about it on emergency forums. A myth of organization. A blood bank with skyscrapers, a commune where humans and their keepers lived in peace. Turns out, it wasn't a joke. Miles of underground infrastructure, controlled climates, blood flow governance modeled on ancient aqueduct logic. Those who enter rarely leave, but not because they're dead, because they're absorbed. Housed, used, preserved. The language is polite. Harmony in the Dominion. But harmony built on extraction is just civility with sharper teeth. Still, it's the first signal I've heard in weeks that wasn't static or ghosts. I want to believe someone's in there. transmitting by choice. I want to believe there's a reason they're reaching out now. But part of me fears this isn't an invitation. It's a declaration. They're not surviving anymore, they're organizing. This is Miles, still tuning in, still not sure whether hope or signal strength is more dangerous. The war didn't begin with blood. It began with paper, a pact drafted in quiet rooms, beneath the flicker of failing fluorescent lights. Lawyers still existed then, the kind that survived collapse better than most, fluent in the language of loopholes and last resorts. It was called the Blood Accord, though it never used that name publicly. The language was clean, sterile. Resource Allocation Framework for Post-Collapse Stabilization. That was the title, but what it meant, what it was a surrender. We gave away our sovereignty, our cities, ourselves, in exchange for the promise of peace. A regulated harvest, they said, a compromise between dominion and extinction. Not war, just equilibrium. Each region was assigned a quota, weekly plasma draw, monthly hemoglobin contribution. The High Councils called it civilized. And to enforce it, the remnants of human governments were folded into what they called neutral oversight bodies. Blood brokers in suits. I've read parts of the original treaty, scanned copies traded in back channels. The phrasing is subtle. Biological partnership zones, voluntary contribution scheduling. But buried in the margins are the clauses that matter. The emergency protocols, the enforcement appendices, the list of cities approved for secondary harvesting if quotas weren't met. Newark, Austin, Tallahassee. Cities bled out to meet balance sheets. No one voted on it. They signed it on our behalf when we had no air left to argue. Maybe that's how most empires fall. Not with force, but with a pen. This is Miles. Still unsigned. Still bleeding on his own terms. We weren't prisoners. That would have been too obvious. Too easy to recognize. No, they called us reservoirs. Cataloged, indexed, embedded with subdermal tags that logged our biometric yield. Blood quality, recovery rate, behavioral compliance. You could scan a wrist and know a man's value in milliliters. Children were scanned at birth, elders at death, just in case the marrow still held something of use. Harvest wasn't constant. That would have drawn rebellion. It was rhythmic, predictable. You'd be summoned for evaluation. Walk yourself into sterile clinics under bright lights and soft voices. The nurses still wore white, still smiled, still said thank you when they were done. And we thanked them back, not because we believed it, because we were afraid not to. Some of the enclaves resisted, tried to run without donation. But without trade access, you couldn't get meds, couldn't get clean water. The drones would mark your grid as unsanctioned, and within days, you'd be cut off, cut down. We adapted, because we always do. Some people even built faith around it, called the process the giving, claimed it was a holy act, that to nourish the evolved was to share in their ascension. I met a man once who tattooed his blood type on his forehead, said he wanted to be transparent. He bled out in a flood tunnel after a double pint draw went wrong. No one collected the body. They didn't need the rest of him. Just what flowed through. We became vessels, with names, with memories, but livestock all the same. This is Miles. Still remembering, still refusing to kneel when the needles come. I've intercepted a lot of fragments. Voicemails, emergency broadcasts, half-degraded field notes uploaded to dead servers. But last night, I picked up something different. A satellite relay, still miraculously functional, pulled down a looping audio file. Date stamped 6 months ago. Origin, New Orleans. The voice was female, mid-30s maybe. Hoarse, wet. You could hear water slapping concrete in the background. She was speaking low, like someone afraid to wake the walls. If you find this, don't go to the dome. That's what they called it. Said it was a safe zone. Said the Crescent Harvest Compact made New Orleans an exception. That the Accord would protect us. We believed them. They had tents, lights, Clean medical gowns, blood tests, voluntary at first, then mandatory, then routine, then we stopped seeing the people who went in. By week 2, they were rationing exits. You couldn't leave unless your yield was high enough. I watched my sister give everything just to get her son out. They sent him back 2 days later. He was tagged. I'm not recording this to warn you. It's too late for warning. I'm recording this so someone knows, we knew, that we saw it coming. That we walked into the slaughterhouse because they promised us shelter. Her voice cracked at the end. Not from emotion, from blood loss. The last sound was a gurgled breath. Then silence. That dome still stands. Shows up on drone mapping as Zone R-8 stabilized. Stabilized. We keep using words like that, like they mean peace. But some things are quiet because everything inside them is already gone. This is Miles. Still listening to the ghosts. We talk about freedom like it's a switch. On or off. Yes or no. But what is consent when the only choices left are bleed or starve? They built entire doctrines around the illusion of autonomy. Forms to sign, buttons to press. Do you accept the terms of harvest? Check yes. Check number, but behind every no was a punishment. Behind every yes, a hollow kind of survival. In some zones, you could still smile, still walk home, still tuck your children into bunkers warmed by filtered air and irradiated rice, but you couldn't speak against it, couldn't opt out. You weren't supposed to want to. That was the brilliance of the design. They made the bloodletting feel like gratitude. Thank you for the contribution. Every drone said it, every nurse, every interface prompt. But gratitude forced is not consent. It's capitulation. And we've been kneeling for so long. Some of us have forgotten how to stand. This is Miles, still choosing to bleed only for those who remember what choice even means. Something came through tonight, not a voice. Not in any language I've ever known, but it spoke. A low hum at 47 kilohertz, layered over the bands like oil on water. I thought it was static at first, but the rhythm was wrong. Too patterned, too intentional. 3 tones, pause, 2 tones, pause, 5 tones, repeating. I ran it through the old signal processor Elise built, the one with the neural mod filter. It tried to translate, it failed, and then categorized it as non-human structured acoustic. It has syntax. It has stress. It's not ours. And it's not machine either. My blood went cold listening to it. Not from fear, from recognition. Some part of me, buried beneath logic and memory, responded. A resonance. Like something inside me remembered it. I don't know what it means yet. But I know this. It wasn't meant for all of us, just the ones who have already begun to change. This is Miles. Still tuned in, still not alone on this frequency. Before the treaties, before the harvest zones and the donor chains and the slow burn surrender of human will, there was a plan. A last gasp stitched together by virologists, nanochemists, and every dwindling ounce of hope the United Nations could spare. They called it the Crimson Protocol. Not a weapon, not a defense grid, a replacement, synthetic plasma, artificial blood that could mimic hemoglobin, carry oxygen, and most importantly, satisfy the parasite. It sounded impossible. It almost was. But for one brief moment, 6 weeks, maybe less, the world thought it might work. Factories in the old medical corridors of Switzerland and South Korea spun up production. Drone fleets preloaded with pallets. Deployment maps sketched over continents like tourniquets. And then, nothing. Shipments disappeared. Labs went dark. The storage bunkers in Nairobi burned. The ones in Ontario never arrived. The backup servers, redundantly mapped across 3 continents, vanished from the grid within 48 hours. Some blamed sabotage. Others said the hemotropes had insiders. One whispered theory was that it worked too well, that the parasite rejected it not biologically, but ideologically. A hunger denied its host is still a hunger. But a hunger bypassed? That's an extinction. In the end, the Crimson Protocol didn't fail, it was erased, like it was never meant for us. This is Miles. Still breathing, still running on borrowed blood. I still have the archive file. Found it embedded in a backup node near the burned-out Helix lab in Nevada. The file was labeled simply KHN512. No metadata, no timestamp, just audio. I remember his voice from the old feeds. Dr. Varankana, lead virologist for the Geneva effort, the man who studied the parasite more closely than anyone else, until he disappeared. His voice is brittle here. Not afraid. Resigned. We thought we were mapping a virus, he says, but this isn't a contagion. It's an adaptation. It doesn't spread by chance. It selects. It seeks. He goes on, talks about recombinant pathways. How the parasite rewrites sequences in the host genome with precision, like a surgeon with centuries to practice. This thing isn't random. It's directional. It adapts faster than we do, not just medically, culturally, socially. It learns what we fear, what we value. Then it uses those things as entry points. I can hear him pausing, breathing slow. Maybe the air was running low. Then this. You can't outsmart it, because it doesn't want to be smarter. It wants to replace the need for intelligence, for questioning, for resistance. It offers function. That's what makes it dangerous. The last thing he says before the line dissolves, we were never fighting a disease. We were interrupting a system upgrade. That part still rings in my head some nights. This is Miles, still analog, still running interference. They don't all look the same. The ones you see on the outside, the raiders, the ferals, the wild bloods who skulk in shattered malls and feed off the desperate, they're not the architects of the Dominion. They're symptoms. The real power lies deeper. The hematropes, not born, not turned in a fevered alley, selected, cultivated, designed through genetic drift and surgical breeding. Their blood runs thick with modified cell structures, a hybridized blend of human erythrocytes and parasitic enzymes. They don't need to feed as often. They don't fear light, only loathe it. Their bodies are cooler than ours. Denser, slower heart rate, faster clot response, regenerative tissue cycles that defy decay. They can taste intention in blood, identify age, illness, adrenaline, emotion, just from a single drop. But it's not the biology that terrifies me. It's the philosophy. They don't see what they've become as monstrous. They see it as refinement, efficiency evolved, sentience distilled. Their cities, the domed havens like Hematopolis, run on principles of extraction and harmony. Harmony meaning order, meaning hierarchy, meaning hunger, balanced not by suppression, but by obedience. They don't ask permission. They offer structure, and we, ever desperate, too often say yes. I've read their manifestos, translated from blood script to English by resistance labs. The core belief is chilling in its calm. We do not hunt, we harvest, and what is harvested is honored. This is Miles, still unharvested, still unclaimed. I heard it tonight, cut through the low-pressure wind like a blade made of sound. A scream, human, maybe, far off, too raw to be fear, too long to be pain. It wasn't a call for help. It was a release, a sound made when something is taken, not all at once, but over time, piece by piece, until the scream is all that's left to give. I didn't go looking, not because I was afraid, not entirely. Because I've learned there are moments when silence is not cowardice, it's acknowledgement. There are screams we were never meant to answer, because sometimes the answer is too late. Instead, I sat by the transceiver and listened to the static hum, wondering if anyone else heard it, if anyone else paused, if anyone else felt that brief throb of old-world guilt, that instinct to run toward the noise, to try and pull someone back. But this world, it doesn't let you pull people back. It pulls forward, through you, past you. I used to think we were conquered, but what if this wasn't conquest? What if this was inheritance? The earth didn't collapse under weight. It evolved into a shape that could carry it longer. And we just didn't fit. This is Miles, still on the wrong side of the bloodline, still broadcasting. They fed tonight. Not in a frenzy, not in carnage. It was calm, organized, almost reverent. I watched from the roof of a collapsed courthouse. The glass cracked under me when I leaned, but I stayed. You learn to trust your weight in ruins. You learn what holds. Below, under hanging electric lanterns strung between steel beams, the ceremony unfolded with unsettling grace. The humans, a dozen or so, were led in single file. No chains, no resistance, just soft music playing from a buried speaker somewhere, and the low hum of a generator filtered through cloth to muffle the noise. They wore clean tunics. They were bathed. One of them even smiled as she was seated. Across from them stood the feeders, not cloaked. No theatrics, medical gloves, clipboards. One knelt beside an older man and whispered something that made his eyes close before the needle entered. There was no screaming, no struggle, no spectacle, only precision and silence. This wasn't hunger. This was ceremony, a ritual constructed not just to extract, but to preserve a myth that this was humane, that we were not being consumed, but shared. Somewhere deep in my chest, I wanted to shout, to throw something, to break the illusion, but I didn't move, because this is how it ends, not with blood spilled, but with dignity choreographed. This is Miles, still watching, still unraveling the theater of control. They call it consent, and on paper it might even look like it. The rituals are thorough. A biometric scan, a signature pad, a soft-spoken affirmation. I agree to contribute. That's the phrase they repeat 3 times. There are candles, incense. In some districts, they even play recordings of old parliaments reading constitutional rights over the loudspeakers, as if the echo of democracy might cleanse the sound of a vein opening. But it's not choice. Not when the alternative is starvation. Not when your children only eat if your blood yield is high enough to earn ration tokens. Not when opting out means exile, and exile means death, or worse, disappearance into unauthorized harvest camps. So they sign, they nod, they say yes, and the system records it all. Because consent, when extracted under threat, becomes performance, and performance, when wrapped in protocol, becomes doctrine. They call it civilization. They say it's a better way, and perhaps for those who feed it is. But I have stood in silence while those who could not read signed contracts they didn't understand. I have watched translators bend words to please their overseers. I have seen a child raise his hand and offer his wrist, just to be told, not yet. This isn't consent, it's choreography. This is Miles, still remembering what choice used to feel like. There's a museum now. I've heard whispers. Deep beneath the ruins of old Toronto, they've built a gallery of what they call red aesthetic. Paintings made in plasma dye, sculptures formed from reclaimed marrow glass, performances choreographed to mimic the slowing of a human pulse under extraction. They call it blood culture. And it's not satire. It's not rebellion. It's reverence. The feeders believe in what they're building. They speak of beauty, of balance, of unity through consumption. They quote old philosophers and new ones that were turned, ones that adapted, ones that began to write about the harmony between predator and participant. In some enclaves, they recite poetry during draws. In others, bloodletting is paired with music, curated soundscapes to soothe the donor's mind. There's choreography to every movement, every draw, a dance, every silence, sacred. The art is real. That's the part that chills me. Some of it is beautiful, but beauty shaped from subjugation is still a cage. And reverence without resistance becomes ritual. Ritual becomes law. And law becomes inheritance. They're not just feeding anymore, they're remembering, they're preserving, they're documenting. And when a culture documents itself, It stops believing it's temporary. This is Miles. Still refusing to call their gallery a shrine. Just before the final draw, when the last lantern flickered beneath the ash drift, I saw her. Small, no more than 9. Thin frame, black hair tied in a frayed ribbon. She wasn't seated with the others, wasn't led. She stood behind a pylon near the edge of the feeding floor, her eyes fixed not on the ceremony, but on the shadows. And then she moved, quick, deliberate, through a break in the smoke, slipping between 2 rusted barricades like a ghost who still remembered the way out. No one noticed. Not the feeders, not the watched, not even the drones. Just me. I don't know where she went. I don't know if she'll make it. But in a world where everything is ritualized, sanitized, and supervised, her disobedience felt like thunder. It reminded me that even in systems built to consume, there are fractures, fault lines, and sometimes the smallest things slip through. This is Miles, still tracking ghosts, with names not yet spoken, still hoping the ones who run find somewhere to land. The city above is gone. Phoenix, or what's left of it, is a lattice of collapsed freeway. Veins and glass bones powdered to dust. The sun here doesn't rise. It filters down like old regret, dulled through layers of particulate ash thick enough to bury an empire, but beneath it, the vault still breathes. It took me 2 days to get in. The entrance was caved in, the keypad dead, the air stale. I crawled through a ventilation shaft lined with soot and silence. The signal here was weak, but not gone. Something pulsed underneath the static. Low, slow, rhythmic. Memory doesn't die easily when it's digitized. The vault used to be a neural archive, a government experiment to preserve lived experience in data form. They called it continuity. It was supposed to keep cultural memory alive. One last project before the blackout years. I didn't come here for continuity. I came here for Elise. She used to talk about this place. Said she knew a team working on emotional transcriptions. The kind that record not just voice, but tremor, affect, blood pressure, hormonal response. A soul etched into code. I didn't know what I'd find. I still don't. But the servers hummed when I powered the relay. The signal rose like a breath that hadn't been taken in years. There's something left in here. And if it speaks, I'll listen. This is Miles, still searching the bones for her name. They call themselves the Memory Traders. Not a cult. Not quite a commune. Just people. Mostly ex-scientists, engineers, data biologists who stayed behind in the vaults after the collapse, not because they had nowhere else to go, but because nowhere else remembered them. They don't hoard food. They don't trade fuel or water. They trade emotion, raw neural captures, slices of memory preserved from before the fall, a laugh in a kitchen, a child's hand reaching for the light switch, rain on an open window, fear, joy, grief, compressed, labeled, and stored in hundreds of rust-proof drives. And you can feel them with the right interface, a transcranial patch, a drip feed, a calibrated sync. They let you relive the fragment just for a minute, maybe 2. Enough to cry, enough to remember what it was like to feel something that wasn't survival. But it costs. They don't accept barter, only blood. Your plasma buys your access. Your cells are the currency that feeds their machines, powers their processors, cools their cores. You bleed to feel again. Some people come here to trade once, others never leave. They wander the vault, pulse monitors strapped to their necks, begging for just one more minute of someone else's past. They call it communion. I call it something else. This is Miles, still choosing my memories the slow way. I found her, not alive, not in body, but in code. She was stored under a Tier 2 directory labeled Personal Logs Flagstaff below. Audio file, high compression, metadata tagged in red, processed in crisis, the kind of file that doesn't get saved unless someone wanted it to be heard. Her voice flickered into my headset, faint but steady. I hadn't heard it in over a year. This is Elise Maynard, Infirmary Lead, Zone Delta 4. Flagstaff below is compromised. She pauses. You can hear her breathe. Shallow, controlled. We held them off for 2 nights, but they weren't feral. They were organized. I recognized some of their faces. Patients, people I treated, people I trusted. The sound shifts. Debris. A soft choking sound. She's crying, but she doesn't let it bend her voice. I don't know who to save anymore. The sick, the strong, the ones who still ask questions, or the ones who stopped needing to? Silence, then softer. Miles, if this gets to you, I hope you never came back. I hope you found something green, something warm. There's a scraping sound, a final click. No goodbye, just a memory cut short. Like breath held too long underwater. I didn't cry. Not then. There was no room for it inside the vault, but the ache landed in the center of my chest, like something waking up too late. She's gone, but she remembered me. And that was enough to break the silence inside me. This is Miles, still listening to the pieces she left behind. I've been thinking about what it means to store a memory, to seal a part of your life in code, polished, preserved, replicated across drives and networks, played like a song, sold like a ration, archived like a shrine. Does it belong to the one who lived it, to the one who captured it, or to the one who feels it next? In the world we've inherited, memory is commodity. It's escape. It's therapy. For some, it's theology. I met a woman last year who believed every recorded moment would be stitched together in the afterlife, that the vaults were heaven's preface. But I wonder, are we remembering for the right reasons? Are we preserving because we care, or because we're terrified of disappearing? When I heard Elise's voice, something inside me buckled. Not because I missed her, not because I mourned, but because I knew that part of her had become available, downloadable, selectable. And I hated that. She was more than a file, more than a timestamp, more than a heartbreak played through the headphones in the dark. We treat memory like a legacy, but sometimes memory is just a wound, one we reopen every time we press play. So I won't trade mine. I won't upload them. I won't let the machines curate my sorrow, because pain is proof that something was real. This is Miles, still remembering, still refusing to sell the ghosts that made me. Something blinked out today, not in me, not this time, in them. A solar flare, rare and ragged, cut through the atmospheric haze and shattered half the relays east of the divide. The sky rippled, not with light, but with interruption. Brief, brutal, then gone. And just like that, the Dominion's lattice went dark. Their whisper webs, their synced drones, their blood-coated signal trails, all quiet. For a few hours, the Empire stuttered. The air didn't feel free. Not exactly, but it didn't feel owned. I sat there with my hand hovering above the transmitter key. Coordinates for Second Sun burned into my notebook, ready to broadcast. I've never spoken them aloud. Not once, not even to myself. Because if that place falls, if the wrong ears find it, we lose more than soil and shelter. We lose the myth of sanctuary. But the window was open. For the first time in months, I could have shouted the way. And I didn't. Because even hope can kill if you whisper it loud enough. Still, I wonder who else saw the blackout. Who else noticed the quiet? A silence that wasn't ours for once. Just theirs. This is Miles. Still weighing words like their lives. The math doesn't work. That's what it comes down to in the end. One transmission. Dozens, maybe hundreds could hear it. Maybe 5 make it to the safe zone. Maybe 15 die trying. Maybe more. And every death would start with my voice. There's a mercy in knowledge. A kind of warmth that sparks behind the eyes when someone tells you where to go, how to live, what to hope for. I know, because I felt it. Felt that small, flickering joy that blooms when a stranger says, there's something left. But mercy given blindly becomes bait, and I can't afford to set a trap. Not again. Not after Wichita. Not after the caravan I led north, back when I still believed direction and survival were the same thing. We lost 14. Only 2 were taken. The rest bled out by the ravine, not from violence, but from following my hope too far into the dark. So I stayed quiet. And I hate myself for it, but hate is easier than guilt. And guilt, that sticks in the throat. This is Miles, still holding silence like a shield. The flare faded by dusk. The networks began to rethread themselves, slow, fractured, like tendons regrowing from bone. But before they could fully recover, something slipped through. A voice, low, deliberate, paced like someone used to being obeyed. Miles, just that at first. My name, drawn out like a breath held too long. Then, you've been watching the dark. So have I. I froze. Switched frequencies. Recalibrated filters. Ran it through the static band. No ID, no code tag. Not Dominion tech, not resistance either. The voice returned. I am called Lazar. I am not what you fear. Not anymore. He didn't growl, didn't gloat. He spoke. Like a man reading scripture carved from regret. The ones you run from still hunger. I do not. I have found another current. A slower pulse. My fingers trembled. I was made as they were made, but I refused the rhythm. I stopped feeding. I began listening. That's how I found you. And then, silence just for a second, before he said, do you believe in reversal, Miles? In the undoing of evolution? That was all. The signal collapsed like lungs out of air, and I was left with a name, Lazar, a voice in the static, claiming to be more than predator, less than enemy. This is Miles, still wondering who, what just spoke. I almost let it go, almost chalked it up to desperation, a trick of audio or hope. But right before the signal died, Lazar whispered something else. The womb is not yet dry. 7 words I've only heard once before. From Elise, back in the early days, when we still shared night shifts at the field hospital. She used to mutter it under her breath. Always after someone died too young, too fast. A phrase she never explained. One she said she learned from her grandmother. But it never felt like folklore. It felt like code, like prophecy. Now it's in Lazar's mouth. A vampire, or something close, speaking words Elise held like prayer. I don't know what it means. Not exactly. But I know this. She never told anyone but me. And now, someone else knows. This is Miles. Still listening. Still haunted. Still not alone on this frequency. It wasn't on any map. Not anymore. But the signal was real. Faint, pulsing, buried beneath static and wind and time. It guided me past the old highway systems where the road signs were sandblasted to nothing and the asphalt gave way to ash. I followed it through barbed scrublands, across frozen irrigation lines, until I reached the perimeter. Tall fencing, triple-layered razor coils, all dead now. No current humming through the mesh, no drones circling overhead. Just rusted signs that still read, Authorized Harvest Zone. Entry by agreement only, but no one agrees to this. The gates hung open like a mouth that forgot how to close. Inside, the world was too still, not abandoned, preserved. The quiet here didn't feel like decay. It felt like the silence you find in a confession booth or a morgue. Functional, cold, waiting for someone to ask the right question. This was a blood farm, government run once, designed to meet plasma quotas without the mess of raids or ration programs. A sterile solution to a messy problem. Bodies in, pints out. Regulated, refined, repurposed. I expected screams etched into the walls. What I found was something worse. Order. This is Miles. Still wandering through the architecture of compromise, the facility still had power. Minimal, just enough for soft systems. Emergency lights ran in slow pulses. Terminals blinked with waiting prompts. And deeper inside, the hum of AI systems that hadn't been shut down, just left behind. They were built for yield, not empathy. Biometric entry points, scanned wrist chips. Fourth rigs dropped from the ceiling on silent tracks. Each station was labeled with a 3-digit code and a blood type. Reclining chairs with built-in restraints. Soft, seamless, not to hold someone down, but to suggest comfort. I found logs still running, 1,000 cycles deep, each entry logged by number, never name. Subject compliant, draw complete, nutrient fluid administered, subject, not patient, not donor, subject. The AI didn't know we fell, or maybe it did and just didn't care. It operated on the assumption that obedience was perpetual, that as long as the light stayed on, the system would function, and if no new subjects arrived, it would wait. The chairs were empty now, but I could still hear the clicks of the auto sanitizers, still see the slow sweep of the retinal trackers like they were searching for someone to love again. It wasn't malice, it was design. A machine doesn't need cruelty to commit atrocity, only indifference. This is Miles, still walking the halls where guilt was automated. In the back chamber, behind the final intake corridor, I found them, scratched into metal, dozens, hundreds, names, some in cursive, some printed in blocky desperation, some scrawled so faintly they were almost gone. No slogans, no messages, just names. Like last words, whispered to no one. I traced a few with my hand. Linda W.B. Amira, 12. Some had dates, some just ended. I stood there a long time, letting the air settle around me like dust. These weren't memorials, they were records. Proof that someone had passed through this place and needed to be remembered, even if only by steel and silence. Maybe they volunteered, maybe they were promised security, maybe they were taken, but they left marks. I think about that a lot. The need we all have, even at the end, to be known. Not saved, not mourned, just known. This is Miles, still writing down every name I can find. There was one final terminal, still active, behind the admin wing, dust-coated, cracked, and waiting. I loaded the last audio packet left in its buffer. It was Elise. Her voice, weak, thinned by exhaustion, still had weight. They're trying something new. A seed settlement, hidden in geothermal vents. They call it Second Sun. No feeding, no quotas. They're growing blood cells in algae farms. Real independence, real resistance. She paused. We're not the past, Miles. We're a different future. Come if you can, but come ready. They won't take passengers, only purpose. That was it. No coordinates, just a direction, north. The signal ended in static, but something in her tone, she believed, and for the first time in a long while, I do too. This is Miles, still holding on to her voice. I packed my gear at dusk, didn't speak, didn't record. Some things are too sacred to narrate. I left the terminal running, left the doors open, left the names untouched, and I walked north toward the mountains, toward geothermal vents, toward the only rumor that didn't feel like a lie. For the first time in a long while, I'm not running from something. I'm walking toward it. Second Sun. Whatever it is, even if it's a myth, it has momentum. And in this world, momentum is rare. This is Miles. Still moving, still believing, still broadcasting. The first thing I noticed was the warmth. Not the kind that comes from fire or breath or shelter. The warmth that rises from the bones of the earth itself. A slow, steady exhale through vents carved by fault lines and mercy. This place, it's built into the mountain. Not above it, not around it. Within. Second Sun. I found it 3 days after the signal cut off, just as my water ran thin and my lungs began to feel the weight of silence. There were no signs, no gates, just a dip in the ridge and a column of steam that didn't scatter in the wind. I followed it down, past rocks that pulsed with moss, past geothermal vents wrapped in repurposed solar blankets, past motion detectors that didn't sound alarms, just opened the path forward. No guards, no drones, only watchers. They let me enter, not with trust, but with quiet. Second Sun isn't a camp. It's a rhythm, a place where the blood economy ends and something else, something stubborn, something slow and deliberate, begins. They grow food here, recycle heat, speak in soft tones and shorter sentences. No one hurries, no one bleeds without cause. Life doesn't pulse here, it breathes. This is Miles. Her name is Talia. She's 6, maybe 7. Born after the sky dimmed, after the flare storms buried the sun beneath ash and memory. She's never seen morning, not the kind we used to know. But she draws it anyway. Crayon suns, melted oranges and gold smeared across old walls and oxygen tanks. She paints halos over the heads of the volunteers who till the algae farms. She draws light like it's her inheritance. I asked her once what it looked like. The sun she's never seen. She didn't blink. It's warm, and it moves. It touches things and makes them real. And then she added, they say it used to come back every day, like a promise. That word, promise, broke something inside me. Because in this world, promises are brittle. Even the sky doesn't keep them anymore. But Talia believes. And belief in the hands of a child born in dusk. That's not delusion. That's defiance. She doesn't know what the world used to be. But she's already trying to draw it back into being. This is Miles, still learning how to see through the eyes of someone unbroken. They found a way. Not to kill the hunger, but to unbind it. In the lower greenhouses, sealed under condensation domes powered by geothermal taps, they cultivate spirulina strains engineered with recombinant human cell markers. Algae, modified, alive, and growing. They extract plasma analogs from it. Protein-rich, oxygen-bonded, not perfect, but compatible. Enough to replace what the body can't regenerate fast enough on its own. Enough to end the need for harvest. Second Sun doesn't run on donors. It runs on cultivation, on photosynthesis, filtered through soot, through patience, through science that doesn't demand sacrifice. They still bleed here, for tests, for medicine, for moments. But they don't extract. They share. The system isn't infinite, but it's honest. And in a world where even breath is taxed, honesty feels revolutionary. This isn't victory, not yet. But it's resistance shaped into biology. This is Miles, still breathing among the unbled. They talk in whispers here, Dul, not out of fear, but reverence. Of defectors, vampires who walked away from Dominion command, who turned down blood rations, who chose to live closer to the cold, closer to themselves. One name floats more than others, Lazar. No one knows where he is. Or what he wants. Only that he stopped feeding, that he speaks in frequencies not meant for war. And then there are the others, humans, or something near it, whose blood doesn't register as compliant. Partial immunity, maybe evolution, maybe fluke, maybe something that was always inside us, waiting for the right pressure to surface. There's no proof, but the idea alone is oxygen, because if even one of us changed, maybe the story isn't finished. This is Miles, still tracing rumors like their roots. I installed a repeater today. Old gear, salvaged from the Flagstaff grid. Boosted with a solar capacitor, barely functional. But it's enough. Enough to speak again. Enough to broadcast, even if only across the valley. Talia was with me, watched as I tuned the coil, stabilized the current. And then she asked, what was the world like before? I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. Not because I didn't remember, but because I did. How do you explain A world where water flowed freely, where sunlight was taken for granted, where no one traded blood for bread. How do you explain beauty to someone who's never had time to doubt it? I looked at her, at the smudge of color on her cheeks, the paint under her fingernails, the hope in her question, and I said nothing because silence was the truest answer I had. This is Miles, still broadcasting, still surviving, still unsure what kind of world she'll grow into, but hoping now that it will be hers. It's been 32 days. No storms, no new arrivals, no raids. Just the low hush of steam moving through cavern walls and the quiet rhythm of algae bubbling under filtered light. Second sun has settled into its breath. That long, warm exhale of something learning to live again. I've resumed the broadcasts. Not daily, not even regular, but often enough to keep my voice from fading inside me. Often enough to remember why I still speak into this frequency, even when no one answers. Still, something has shifted. Not out there. In me. It started with my sleep. Dreams that run backward. Cold sweats where I wake not from fear, but from clarity too sharp to hold. Then the hunger. Not for food. That still comes. Rationed and consistent. But for something else. A pulse beneath my own. A rhythm that doesn't match my breath, yet hums in perfect time, with a geothermal thrum beneath our feet. Like I've tuned into something deeper than memory. Like something inside me has been listening. Not infection, not fever, but presence. I haven't told the others, not yet, because I'm not sure this is sickness. And I'm not sure it's mine alone. This is Miles. Still in one piece, but no longer certain where that piece begins or ends. The voice came back yesterday. Not through my headset, not through the repeater grid. No signal, no spike in bandwidth. Just there, woven into the inside of my skull like breath that isn't mine. Lazar, you're hearing it now, aren't you? No crackle, no pause. Just presence, calm and exacting, like a needle threading through my bloodstream, with words instead of metal. It doesn't require sound. That was always our mistake. Believing transmission needed air, but the parasite was never about infection. It was about networking. He said it like a teacher, not a preacher, like someone remembering something they never wanted to understand. There is a resonance, built into the blood, dormant unless awakened. Most host it, few hear it, fewer still answer. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. He heard my fear the way you might feel someone's pulse shift in your palm. You think you're changing, he said. You're not. You're remembering. There's a difference. That stayed with me all day. The distinction, change implies betrayal of what you were, of what others hoped you'd stay. But memory, that's different. That means it was always there. This is Miles. Still hearing a voice that doesn't breathe, but somehow knows me. I spent last night going through my old blood logs. Samples Elise and I recorded back in the early collapse, when we still thought we could map the parasite like a contagion. Back when we believed understanding it could undo it. But we were asking the wrong questions. We thought it was about survival. It never was. There's a sequence, a repeating pattern embedded deep in the RNA modulation of infected blood, dormant, coiled, inactive until catalyzed by environmental stressors. Not random, not chaotic, structured, like a string of code waiting for its moment. I don't know why I didn't see it before. Maybe I wasn't ready to. But now, looking at it, I feel something familiar in its geometry. The spirals align with lunar gravitational shifts. The resonance peaks match low-frequency sonic vibrations recorded during the Hematopolis broadcasts. This wasn't built to destroy, it was built to transform. Not all at once, not universally, but selectively, quietly, Adaptation at a cellular level, not to feed on the old world, but to survive the next. What if this wasn't a virus? What if this was the blueprint for post-human continuity? Not extinction, not ascension, correction. I don't know what that makes me. Not yet. But I feel the code. Inside the ache in my bones, the heat in my blood, the calm that replaces fear with recognition. This is Miles. Still bleeding. But now, wondering if I was meant to, I replayed her voice again today. Elise, her last full message, before she vanished into rumor and static. She said, "We were always meant to evolve, Miles. But not alone." I didn't understand that when I first heard it. I thought it was metaphor, a comfort for the lonely, a prayer from someone too kind to give up on others. But now, I think she meant it literally. This collapse, the darkness, the blood economy, the drones, the ruin, it wasn't the end. It was the event. The push, the pressure that shapes bone, the heat that transforms iron, the wound that teaches a system to close. This war wasn't about domination. It was about compatibility, about whether we could still adapt when the world refused to wait. Elise knew, or at least she believed, and now I do too. This is Miles, still evolving, still connected. This will be my last transmission for a while. Not because I've lost the will or the words, but because I need to listen now, deeper than before, not just to signal, but to pulse, to current, to the pattern under the skin. If you're hearing this, trace the resonance. It won't sound like a voice. It'll feel like warmth when no fire burns, like a hum beneath your ribs, like gravity shifting, subtly, inward. Don't resist it. Don't fear it. If you've survived this long, you already carry the code. It's not an infection. It's a language, and it's time we learn to speak it. This is Miles, still broadcasting for now. But if I disappear, follow the signal, not in the air, but under the skin.